your lord, or if you're an old school Total War veteran, you may refer to them as your general. The most important figure on the battlefield, responsible for leading your troops into the conflict and commanding them with an iron will. But it seems many people are careless with their lord, charging them into suicidal situations. The loss of your lord is a devastating blow for your army. So we're going to talk about how, where, when, where and why, and what you should do with your general. So let's begin this with an example. 2v2 online here. Good old Durthu's moving up on my dwarves, but little does he seem to realise that I have a flame cannon, a bunch of skirmishers, and there's also a hell cannon firing at him as well. At this point, he should have realised and turned around and got himself out of range. But oh no, he carries on charging up, and he's already at half health before he's even reached the front lines, still taking flame cannon fire, missile fire, and hell cannon fire, and this kind of reckless abandon can only mean one thing: inevitable routing and death. A few minutes into the battle and you've just thrown away not only your general, but 2,000 of your funds. What does this do to your army? It will give all your units a -10 leadership penalty and say Lord dead. It'll actually be more for about the first minute, where it will say Lord died recently, and you'll take an even bigger leadership penalty. This is huge. This will more often than not spell the end of you in this battle. Your units will become very fragile, especially in the late game when they've sustained some damage, and it'll become very difficult to win unless you can kill the enemy's general to even the odds. So let's have a look-see at the different types of generals so we understand what we're dealing with. We've got melee generals, we've got wizards, large generals, and kinda hybrid generals. So for the Warriors of Chaos, they've got the Chaos Lord and Sigvold as their melee generals. Then they've got all different kinds of wizards, who actually aren't terrible in melee as the Chaos because they do have a fair amount of armor, but they're not going to be as efficient or as safe as the melee generals. And then you have large generals, whether it's Karl Franz on Deathclaw, Durthu, or Kolek Suneater. Capable of dealing tons of damage and chewing through infantry, they are very dangerous, but they are large, so they can be shot down, just like Durthu earlier. And then you have some kind of hybrid combo generals, like Archaon here, who's classed as a wizard, but he can definitely hang in melee with his high armor, high melee stats, and potential mounts, with the trade-off that he's very expensive. So one thing we can do to protect our generals, let's say we have a Chaos Lord, for example, who is a melee expert. So he's pretty good at fighting in crowds, but he's not so good in the duels and one-on-ones with other lords or enemy heroes. So quite simply, I'm just going to bring him a bodyguard, in the form of an exalted hero. I'm going to keep them together for the entire battle so that they can deal with any enemy characters. Alternatively, I could just bring a single high tier unit as bodyguards to protect him as well. These chosen will follow him around for the entire battle and not leave his side. Either option can work really well, and it can depend on the faction and army that you're facing. If you're facing an army with a lot of monsters or a large general, you could bring halberds instead to keep him safe, or attacks from flying lord / hero combos. Or if you'd rather he's more self-sufficient and takes care of himself, you could chuck him on a mount and he can get himself out of danger in most cases. But do be aware, once you put him on a mount that is large, he will become a large general, and thus anti-large units will become dangerous to him, as they weren't before. So just be aware of that when mounting up. But there are specific dangers to you when you're on foot as well. So Prince Sigvold here is a duelist. Duelist characters do better in one-on-one fights with other enemy characters. So if Sigvold was fighting the Chaos Lord, he'd have the advantage. So be wary of trying to fight enemy duelists one-on-one. Or if you're the one with the duelist advantage, go and look for enemy characters to fight one-on-one. As for your wizards, they usually don't have a lot of armor or a lot of health. They have low melee stats and they don't put out a ton of melee damage. Of course, magic is their strength. So protecting them with a bodyguard unit or giving them a mount to keep them out of trouble is pretty essential. And then we have our large generals. If you've seen my big targets tactic video, you probably already know all about this. Large generals are very dangerous, and there's very few melee units that can stand up to them apart from anti-large. But they are huge targets for missiles and artillery. So charging them in blindly like someone did with Durthu earlier is just putting them at unnecessary risk and asking for trouble. And lastly, some of the top tier generals who are a lot tougher, like Archaon here. He can kind of do it all. He can hang in melee, he can throw magic around. He has tons of health, a shield, can do magic damage, really a valuable asset, but he does cost nearly 3 grand, which is a lot, so you have to weigh up the money side of things as well. And that is most of the types of lord. There are some ranged generals as well, like the Glade Lords, but they kind of fall in the ranged category like the wizards. So try to be aware of your general's strengths, although understand that you don't have to rigidly stick to that strength. Prince Sigvold, the duelist, isn't going to do terribly if you throw him into a crowd, it's just that he's more effective being a duelist. But be careful of who he does fight. Higher tier armor piercing units may do a significant amount of damage to him. He's probably better off pimp slapping Balthazar Gelt off his fluffy pony. but he may be not so great against a massive undead dragon with Manfred von Carstein on it. So he's going to get out of that situation and let some anti-large units deal with him. These halberds should take care of that no problem. And the player of this general should have realised that he's fighting chosen halberds and some regular halberds with his large general, and got him out of there post haste. Now if you've opted to bring a large general like good old Kolek here, then you have to be aware of the threats to him out on the battlefield. Missile units, artillery, specifically cannons because they can be very accurate on large units, and anti-large units like halberdiers here. Quite simply, you just need to stay out of the battle for a while, at least for the first few minutes of the battle, until these things can be dealt with by other sections of your army. This may not sound ideal, but saving your high-powered general for the late game can actually be a really great tactic. Someone like Kolek who causes terror will be great at finishing off the leadership of wounded units. But Kolek has just spied himself some prey, these lone greatswords looking like they're going around for a flank, perfect for Kolek to deal with. Kolek will smash through their armour no problem, and they're not anti-large so they're not a great threat to him. They will do a bit of damage, but it's a good trade-off because if he destroys that entire unit, that's the enemy's best, most expensive infantry you've just got rid of. A worthy trade-off. And Kolek's biggest weaknesses on the battlefield are being dealt with. These handgunners are being chased off, these ones have been destroyed by Chaos Warhounds, and these Chaos Warhounds are now heading after that artillery. So most of the things that were dangerous to Kolek are being dealt with. It's only the halberds left, which are fairly easy to avoid for a speedy ogre like Kolek. So just be aware of the dangers around to your large general, and keep him at a distance until it's safe to move up. Or, like I just did here, look for an opportunity where you can still get some damage done, but avoid most of the dangerous threats to you. As for your wizard types, bodyguards and mounts are the way to go. While typically they should just avoid any kind of melee fighting, especially enemy characters, it's not that they can't ever go into combat. Getting them after missile units or low tier infantry shouldn't be too much of a danger to them, and they can still do something rather than just stand around. But be careful, if your wizard is wearing a dress, he probably can't take too much punishment. Lords and heroes are just the same as any other unit in this game. They have strengths and weaknesses. Remember that. Now for a warning. If you play online, you may have seen concoctions like this a lot. A general with 2 heroes on flying mounts. What people are looking to do with this is assassinate your general. Get him dead within the first few minutes of the fight so they can have an easy win. It's a pretty cheap tactic, and I advise against doing it unless you're too stupid to learn how to play the game. But that being said, it is part of the game, so you have to be prepared for it. You see, this greenskin player has bought 2 goblin big bosses to protect his lightly armoured wizard Wurzag from this threat, so the Bretonnian player isn't going to go in for the assassination. But alas, people's stupidity knows no bounds. The greenskin player is now charging Wurzag towards the trio of death in a bid to save his allies' missile units. Great thinking, buddy, totally worth it. Of course, Wurzag can't stand up to the high onslaught of damage that this trio can do, and he quickly falls and becomes a green corpse. Another example of careless lord management. Keeping Wurzag alive is far more essential than saving 1 unit of handgunners. And of course, his greenskins have taken the Lord died recently penalty and won't stick around for long, spelling disaster for his team's hopes of winning this battle. So watch out for trios of death like this, as they will take out your general very quickly if they're alone. You can also get outmatched in the sky too, and assassinated in the same way, meaning your general will take a lot of damage very quickly and will probably be gone before you know it. Unless you have some missile units to try and help keep him safe and deter the enemy from attacking you, there's not a lot you can do except running the hell away, which may sound somewhat cowardly, but it's much better than the alternative of, death. So my 100 speed orc war boss here can outrun these 2 85 speed units and keep himself safe. The enemy is going to keep me from being around my army for the entire battle, but I do get to be alive, which is going to be big for their morale. I can occasionally fly past and drop a buff, but my enemy's going to keep these flying units on me at all times to keep me away. I managed to scrape a Pyrrhic victory in this one, but I think if my general had gone down early, I definitely wouldn't have been able to win this. So watch out online for enemy hit squads. So try to keep on top of what your general is up to at all times, or you may find him in peril. As powerful as they are and as much damage as they can do, keeping them alive is more important. It can mean the difference between victory and defeat. Now for a few quickfire tips just to finish up. Be careful that your general doesn't get tied up, surrounded by enemy units so that he can barely move and he gets caught taking a lot of damage, especially if you're surrounded by units that you're weak against, like large units taking anti-large damage. So when you charge into the fray of battle, watch out for situations where you may end up surrounded. If you should find yourself in such a situation where you are somewhat surrounded and you have some of your own troops around, you can actually pull your general through your own unit and he won't really get slowed down and can move freely to safety. And of course the enemy won't be able to follow you because your unit's in the way. This is good for getting you out of many dire situations, especially if you're losing a fight to an enemy character. Regeneration is a valuable trait available to many different lords and generals, especially those of the vampire counts who have this ability on most of their generals. If you've ever fought Vlad von Carstein, you know how annoying and useful it can be. But many factions have generals with this ability, like the Orc War Boss can take a potion for regeneration. Prince Sigvold can take some kind of armor trait, I think, for regeneration. So it can very often be worthwhile bringing that along, and then if you send your general into the battle, takes a bit of damage, pull him back out for a while, let him rest and recover that health and go back in again. Regeneration can be very useful for keeping your lord alive. And lastly, you're probably aware that your general has an aura, and any unit within that aura will take a leadership buff, and any other buffs that the general gives off. Hero characters do the same thing, they encourage nearby troops with their aura, increasing their leadership. So if your lord should happen to fall in battle, you can negate some of that -10 lord dead penalty, having your hero stick nearby your units. So if your general should fall, try to treat your hero as the new general. He's important and he has to stay alive to help negate that leadership penalty. There are some normal units that can boost leadership as well, like dwarven units with the old Grumbler trait. There you have it. From this, I hope you can understand the importance of keeping your general alive, and many of you probably already know this and understand this, and you do keep your generals safe. But due to the sheer amount of people I face online and are allied with online that do absolutely foolish things with their general, I felt the need to make a point here. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the future, oh yes.